Thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Mariаны Альвидрес. We are from the University of Texas at El-Paso. And my topic is about secondary mathematics teachers' dispositions in their positional trainings toward their own errors and their student errors. In mathematics education, errors conceptions has been gradually changing. We start from studying errors patterns to errors as frameworks for learning. This last view has been creating learning opportunities, but also has been challenged teachers' beliefs about errors in mathematics, and of course has been challenged their dispositions toward their mistakes and their students' mistakes. Now here in Mexico and U.S., we are living in a city which is bordered with Mexico. So this study was conducted in both countries, and the mathematics reforms, has been stated that errors has been treated as tools for learning. However, our teachers' dispositions may or not converge with this new status of errors. So, reflecting on how are our teachers' dispositions and how these dispositions influence their positionings toward errors in their classrooms become essential. The objective of this mixed method study is examine how teachers' dispositions and their own positionings in the moment-to-moment interactions will be affecting or contributing to using these errors as tools for learning in their classroom. The research design of this study, as I just mentioned, is a mixed methods study. Well, we have the quantitative study where we apply a questionnaire, which name is error orientation questionnaire, that was used to measure our teachers' dispositions toward mistakes. This artifact was used also to select our sample for the qualitative phase. In the qualitative phase, we use semi-instructor interviews, 2 interviews, and we also conduct some observation in their classrooms. From these observations, we produce analytic memos, and we were describing all these observations to analyze data. The triangulation phase was synthesizing findings from the qualitative phase and the quantitative phase, but also triangulation was performed since the very beginning when we were selecting our participants from the quantitative phase for the qualitative phase, and also we were designing our instruments for the qualitative phase based on the quantitative results. Teachers' dispositions toward errors and their positionings. The frameworks that were used to analyze data and to conduct this study were Bayer's mode of dispositional function conceptual framework. This was used to conceptualize disposition construct in relation to mathematics dispositions toward mistakes. We were using 3 different modes of dispositions. There were cognitive dispositions, affective dispositions, and cognitive dispositions. We also use positional framing from Greeno. This last framework provides a support for examining how teachers were positioning during the error episodes or moments in their classrooms. For the quantitative phase, we have 142 participants. And for the qualitative phase, we use a proportional sampling strategy for selecting 4 participants. These participants were selecting from the upper and lower tops of the scores of the error dispositions questionnaire for their different kind of disposition. Data analysis for the quantitative phase, we use their demographic information. We use cross-tabulation and frequency counts. We also use correlation analysis to understand how their dispositions may be or not affected by their gender, their nationality, the level of their mathematics, the level that they are teaching. And also for qualitative phase, we use line-by-line coding and comparison between observation and interviews, but also in respect with their scores, with their dispositional scores. And we were performing these coding techniques from the ground theory perspective. Our initial findings, this study found that the activation of different types of disposition, I just mentioned, cognitive, affective, and cognitive, which is more related with behavioral, by teachers participating in the context of error, align with the way that they position themselves and their students. So we were finding that their positioning in their classroom according to their dispositions. We were applying different kind of questionnaires. The first questionnaire that we applied was that in a general context. Teachers were asked how they see errors in a general context. Then we realized that they were a little bit confused, and we changed our questionnaire. We adapted to the context of their own errors as a teachers and their students' mistakes during learning. And we were seeing them, some of them were having their core dispositions according to different contexts. In this, for example, some teachers were privileging some dispositions according to their positionings, according to their dispositions in their students' mistakes. They also frame what can do their students in their classroom and what they can do. So what are their duties and their rights in the context of errors? Who can be correcting errors? Who can be detecting errors? And these all were from their dispositions also. This finding expands and contributes to the existing research in the field.
Minutes.
We also find that they frame errors according to their dispositions in their classroom. For example, we find 4 different types of framing. We find 2 frames that are according to their productive dispositions toward mistakes, and 2 framings that are according to their non-productive dispositions toward mistakes. For example, in the productive dispositions toward mistakes, we find that they frame errors as resources to learn by understanding and analyzing mistakes. develop a critical thinking, build in errors, and they develop the ability of capitalizing errors. How they do this? By instructional strategies and activities that involve errors. Errors are addressed as a planning activity. Also, they have this systematic connection between errors and learning. They also are very flexible and open toward their own mistakes and their student mistakes. They open communicate mistakes. They use this communication to analyze mistakes, to reflect toward mistakes. They open this discussion as a part of their social mathematical norms. But we also see how these non-productive dispositions toward mistakes are shown in their classrooms by their framings. For example, when they frame errors as deficiencies of learning, they focus on correctness instead of using these errors as learning opportunities. Teachers used to correct errors by themselves. They don't give this opportunity to opening discuss their student errors. They instead correct these mistakes. They don't see this connection between learning and errors. Instead, they are still using this connection between errors and bad grades. They openly express this connection to their students, so their students see their own errors as a treat. They valorize correctness. They hide these mistakes. They don't only not communicate, but they hide their student mistakes. And of course, they hide their own mistakes.
1 minute. You have 1 minute.
And I have some examples of non-productive dispositions. For example, a teacher expressed, when I make a mistake during my teaching, I point it out immediately and try to correct as soon as possible. And in the opposite, a teacher with productive dispositions toward mistakes say that they invite their students to figure out how he mistake. The implications of this study is to support participants to understand their own disposition and how this affects their positions toward mistakes in their own classrooms. And thank you so much.
We can stop sharing. You can stop sharing the screen now.
Okay.
We want to.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
This is what it is that I am going to discuss about lived experience. And after Dor's presentation, I think we have seen it all, how a brand new world is there, and it's always there, but it is not, it is taken for granted, and this needs to be unlocked and unmapped. So what is Doris explained, I felt it very close to what I'm going to explain today. That is about a blueprint of how we look at this new world and how it is structured, if you like. So that is one of the aims of this presentation, is to show you the two basic tools, which is the reduction and the bracketing, but to show it in action and discuss it perhaps in the end of the presentation. And also the complementarity between phenomenology and cultural historical activity theory. So let's move, because time is priceless here. Intentionality, we need to understand it in a very immediate sense, if you like. Like when we were listening to Dor presenting in Russian, and Russian is a language I don't understand. And I'm trying to grasp what he's talking about. And I'm grasping from words like instructor, okay, something there. So I'm trying to make sense from something that I don't know and to come to knowing. This is what phenomenology is about. It's troubling exactly this area where I am intending, my acts are always for something, for an object. I don't hope, I hope something. I don't fear, I fear something. I don't judge, I have a judgment for something, always it is for. So this is the beginning of the story for phenomenology, because everything is situated in finding deeper and better description of how intentionality is working in the active level and in the operative level, but we don't have time for all this. We have to move further. Since I mentioned reduction and bracketing, I just say a couple of words about what it is. The reduction is just to lead back from our natural way. What is our natural way is to aim for an object, yes? Right? We don't do that with a reduction. We don't aim for the object. We aim for the action that brought the object to the surface. We are looking at the intentional move that makes the object appear in the subject's. So this is the reduction, what is doing. And in fact, what we're doing is we're looking at the movement, not at the object. All right. And about bracketing, just a few words, is as we look at it, is like Dor explained it, we try to shift and go behind the mirror, not what we know what is right, objective, but how does the person comes to objectivity, because cognition, in a very primordial sense, is the constitution of objectivity. It stays or it goes, but in this process, objectivity becomes actualized. So bracketing allows us to do exactly that thing. Theory will be over in a while, because now I will enter the empirical aspect, because the empirical aim is to show how significant it was the movement of the teacher to legitimize the student's conception, which other teachers would think of as misconceptions. So it's at the edge. It's a task with 13 students, and we're talking about Diana, one of them, who is struggling to achieve mathematical confidence. It is exactly the opposite than the Russian study that we saw yesterday, which was talking about independence. Now here we have a lack of independence and a struggling to achieve independence in mathematics. This is the case that we will see. And through our phenomenological reflection, we will trace the link between this intuition that helped the student to unlock the task, the connection between this mathematical intuition with the intuitions that followed, that changed her attitudes on learning and on teaching. So that's our focus on the empirical level. It's an open mathematical task. We won't discuss it here. We don't have time, that is. The case of Diana, we already told about it. The teacher especially needs to be mentioned because he does not provide any guidance at all. And he promotes collective work. And he accepts all coherent findings. He's not limited at all. But he doesn't provide any guidance, and we're going to keep this for continuing. And I, as a researcher in these classes, I was also following the teacher, avoiding to provide guidance. Here are some objects that the other students thought of, constituted, if you like, in order to solve the task. It's about doubling modulo. You double a number until it exceeds a certain number, and then you take the difference and you double again. This is kind of the task. So they're trying to recover properties between different numbers and how do they manipulate with this process of the doubling modulo. So quite complicated shapes. And now we'll see how Diana treated it. She is writing down all the processes that is in her mind. She's writing it down. Double by 2, no, yes. It becomes little algorithms. And then she integrates this, because she does this for 15 numbers, and then she intuits that this can become a flow chart. So she puts all the empirical data into one abstract result without troubling how is it solved. But this is her perception. That's exactly where we shouldn't underestimate what could be called conception and misconception. This is a conception, all right, of the task. It may not be what another teacher would be expecting. But let's see how this can help our understanding of it. From the previous experience, Diana was taught, the system he was brought in was to, when she had a problem, to ask for the teacher to guide her. And then she follows the guidance. And if she finds another problem, again, the guidance will help her move forward. This was not the case here. The teacher didn't give any guidance. So the other route, which the teacher promoted, was from the other students. And she not only gained her ideas from the other students, not only did she follow the other students, but also when her ideas were conflicting with the other students, as we will see, she thought her ideas were wrong and she was taking the others' ideas. That's what we were talking about, lack of independence and non-confidence. Is a very typical case of this paradigm, if you like. Now, this understanding, the teacher approved it. It had mathematical ground. It had mathematical narrative base. It was within the perimeters that he had set his class. And it was great for her because she realized for the first time that there is no gap where I'm not learning. Even when she thought that she is not learning, there it was, and it was recognized by the teacher. That means it's objective. She constituted an objectivity that others could also understand, and that is the phenomenological approach of this event, of these facts. So that's what she's saying here in the interview. I've been very cautious when I found an answer. If my answer isn't the same as everybody else's, I've just assumed mine is wrong, because it's not the same as somebody else's. That was the criterion to choose what is wrong. And but her mathematical intuition allowed her to go beyond that. Not only did she solve the task, but she also radically changed her intuition and her attitude to learning. Look what she says here. It's marvelous. I think I've possibly become a bit more confident with what I'm doing, because I'm thinking, well, because I've got a different answer to somebody else, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's wrong. It just means I thought about it in a different way. So it's been good for me. Already she understands that her understandings are valid. She can move with those. She doesn't have to depend on the other students' ideas. And here is the teaching belief radical change, where she says that I've realized from these lessons that it helps more if you help with their understanding of it rather than just give them an answer straight away. And naturally make them think about it and what they are doing and why they're doing it, which obviously is very important with wanting to be a teacher. So she radically changes because she breathes in a answer-feeding environment. And she thinks that's what it is to be a teacher, to provide the answer straight away. And now she thinks, no, hang on a minute, I can understand even if I receive no guidance. So why not let the students? She turns it around and she says, why not me to do the same thing? And she changes radically her perception and attitudes, which was a very interesting case. So here, summarizing, she came to a dead end, and these were the two reasons, basically, that she came to this situation, a survival situation, really. She survived. And that's the results that she got from the survival in confidence, mathematical confidence, and learning sensibility and teaching sensibility, I think. We can see that also in her path to abstraction, because she's using the most elementary, the trial and improvement becomes her material to solve the task. She does solve it. So it's an intuitive proof that it's more general, you see. So we see a local intuition transcending the moment and coming to a generalization about how should I learn, how should I teach, This is what in phenomenology is understood by transcendence, because it moves from, it transcends the locality and it moves to another area, another field of attitudes. That itself justifies the use of the phenomenological term. So the teacher here is saved for the most critical part. It's really legitimizing her approach was the step that it was the critical one, obviously. And with this, she changed her attitude towards the course, because then she was really casual with the course. I'll tell you how confident she was when she had to teach. The last session was devoted for students to teach, and she taught with a completely non-feeding answers. She was sitting, she was learning from the students, she was giving her own understandings. I mean, it was a miracle that she practiced it exactly like that months after this session. So his method of abstaining in this case showed some potential, we have to admit, because she wouldn't have come to this understanding if she would have always had her ready answer, either from the teacher or from the neighbor, which is great. It's not meaning that we should isolate students, but it gives us a good lesson that there is no recipe, there's no golden rule here. Some students need to be activated with radical ways sometimes, not without having anything negative in mind, in the opposite, to just let them do something about the problem, not just find an easy solution from the teacher. 1 minute, it's very good, because I just finished my presentation. All right.
Thank you so much. So I guess we will invite both speakers up front and oh, okay. I don't know how we are going to handle this. Yes, okay, maybe
Should I move?
you will sit up front here, and I will also address Mariana.
Oh, here? Yes?
Would you like to sit down here?
Sure. Yes.
And while we were moving the furniture, maybe some questions appeared in your mind? Maybe I'll start with one question before people are thinking about it.
Yes.
May I ask a question?
Please.
I'll probably start with the second one. Just a clarification, basically. So the teacher still, you said in the end, the instructor accepted all the answers. So
not all the answers that had coherency. I mean, not.
Yes. Yeah. And then the teacher got a confidence because her way, which was different from other students, also was acknowledged by the instructor.
Also the teacher, because he saw that squeezed, if you like, because she expressed negative ideas about the teacher.
Yes, I understand. But I'm curious that she was still uncomfortable until the time she got approved by the authority, rather than getting some feedback from the task and the environment, right? So it was just delayed, rather than feedback was not given right away, but she went through the stage of doubt. I would be rather happy when the next stage would be to sort of negotiate the truth with the environment, with the task itself, rather.
Yes. This is the next step, I think, because I followed her up for a couple of years, where she was still, until she got her degree and I finished my thesis, my PhD there. I watched her in other sessions, how she was troubling the task with her own understanding, trying to become better, but expressing it, saying it, not fearing that somebody will say, "What is that?" It's the next step. I think what you mentioned, I think, is coming, because she feels more confident, but it's not there yet. Yeah, I don't know about it. if it has.
Okay. Do we have any questions to either of the speakers?
Please don't be shy to ask about phenomenological terms or things that you found dense or maybe unclear or whatever. I mean, I tried not to use too much theory in my presentation because there is a discussion. If we want to discuss issues, also are welcome. That's all.
Oh, okay. I don't know.
So, Andonis, I have a question about your use of intentionality from a phenomenological perspective.
Yes.
Are there different kinds of intentionality? So I can think of conscious activity where you have a very conscious intention, but I can understand sort of emergent goals in the context of actions where you may not at all be conscious of any. And those seem like very different kind of species.
Yes, absolutely. There are basically two main kinds of intentionality. The act, that one that we recognize that brings the object and poses it there for us to have discourse. This is the act, the intentionality, but there is the operative intentionality, fungendere intentionalitat from Husserl, which Merleau-Ponty thematized it explicitly and did an amazing extension of it, because he was also a psychologist, not mathematician like Husserl, so many reasons. But the operative intentionality is the one that we see it only from its effects. We can't, it's like the mute richness of the kingdom that allows and makes it possible for the abstract to appear. So I'm trying to go to this border between what is act from the object to the acts down to which are passive and operative, but not constituting. They are preparing the ground, but without them, it wouldn't appear. She may have, for instance, as an example from the presentation, she may have done many times this thing with the trial and error to use it again and again and again, but the context is new here, and she rediscovers it. Phenomenology is based on previous experience, so it's not something that pops out from nowhere. It comes from the interaction with the world. The subject is in the world, and the horizons are worldly horizons. But there is also an inner dynamics that regulates how objects and which objects will come out, will be in circulation, in social circulation. That's why I think it's complementary to the chat. Because exactly what the chat doesn't see, because it sees the affordances of the culture, I see how things become appropriate for the subject to constitute something cultural, and so enter cultural life. I bracket objectivity as given. I see the constituted one as it happens, as it appears through the intentions of the subject, which I trace through the observing and analyzing the phenomenon. That is when it becomes a phenomenon, I think, when one really exclusively addresses this correlation between the meaning that comes out and the act that brought it up to the surface, which makes a historical move, vertical one. You understand?
Okay, thank you for your answer. The next question, please.
Right. Mine
Yes.
was really also to elaborate some of the terminology, because you are speaking about bracketing, and it is not altogether clear what is meant by the bracketing, even in your explanation now. In what way was bracketing important in this particular case?
Bracketing is important because if we would include the teacher, for example, in this case, which he bracketed himself basically. It's not an arbitrary thing. I bracket. Yeah, what does that mean? When I'm following the transcripts and the interviews of the student and the other students, what happened, and so other things are happening there. It's not only one person in the class, and I'm not excluding the class. I also have transcripts of what is happening. But when I'm looking at it, what I'm interested is at the objects that she brought up and the acts of hers. These hers is permeated culturally, it's permeated truly, but I save a space, if you like, for the individual momentum to contribute to culture. It's not just a determined subject, if you like. So I don't know if I answer about bracketing, because whatever is irrelevant in this case, like the teacher, or she is using a paper to write, and the way that she writes down her algorithms, you see, it's all cultural. It's not happening outside of culture. But she makes the thematization, and I bracket anything else apart from the moment of objectivity, when she constitutes the object and the act that makes it happening. If I answered.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Do we have more questions? We probably have a question to Mariana now. It was interesting to hear that you mentioned, maybe it's again a clarification rather than a question. There were some teachers who were hiding errors, right? And that was kind of an interesting behavior. And the others were on the opposite side. They were using this as a source of learning. So do you suggest how this difference came into place and what we as a teacher educator could do? Or do you take sides, what is better or what's supposed to be in our teaching practices? And because it's safer, right? There is no error. It's completely safe atmosphere in the classroom. Yeah. Otherwise, it becomes nervous for everyone, and like the confidence of the teacher is losing, right? Yes. So please.
Yes. Well, primarily when we were measuring their dispositions toward mistakes, these kind of teachers that were hiding their mistakes and their student mistakes, there were scoring very, very low points in their affective dispositions. And then they express during their interviews that the most important thing for they is their students' self-esteem. And maybe that is the reason why they are hiding their student mistakes, because they still believe in that mistaking is something that is not acceptable in the school. So a way to change this kind of beliefs is making them aware about what they are thinking. Sometimes we have this kind of beliefs, but we are not aware of them. So we are trying to also make them aware about how they believe, how they think about their student mistakes, to change that kind of positionings in their classrooms.
Okay. Thank you. So, are there more questions? Okay, would you like to add something? Yes, please. Oh.
Yeah. Just to add to what Marianne described, among those 4 cases, there was a beautiful case of a teacher who herself had, I believe, high score on the error orientation questionnaire, very productive disposition by the survey. So that's what she thinks. But it doesn't necessarily mean she uses that disposition in the classroom. And we were surprised that having higher disposition or productive disposition is not yet the positioning in the classroom. It depends on other factors that impacts the teaching in the classroom. So I think looking for those 4 cases where you see the alignment between the disposition and positioning, or see the case when teacher has the productive disposition, but her positional framing in the classroom is different, and what contributes to that is an interesting piece of the Mariana study.
Yes,
Thank you. You have.
Can I also? I would just like to add as an ending that if you think I tried to make it understood that it's graspable and it's something that starts from our own lived experience, on which we reflect further and further. And there is a methodology behind this analytical way of looking at cognitive moments. And I presented some work in the last survey, and maybe you will find in the proceedings details about the methodology which underlies this work. But I intend to also publish on the same issues of how these become easily visible once we get the attitude that allows them to appear. That's how I would like to end. Thank you.
Connection I see, I think I already mentioned to the teacher disposition, the way she positions herself in the classroom is critical, because I feel that the confidence that your teacher was obtaining because of the instructor's disposition toward that particular teacher, right? So that the teacher played, the instructor played certain role in changing the confidence of the pre-service teacher.
Absolutely, yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
It was so negative before, and because he wouldn't answer to asking him for guidance. He said, "What do you think?" And she said, "Well, if I knew what I think, I wouldn't ask you." You know, this kind. She had a confrontation because she didn't get guidance, and this was something that annoyed her very much because she was not used to it. It had not happened to her, and so clearly. You know, it's like you have no option. Look to your other peers to find answers, but not to the student. Operationally, he would tell, but not instructively. So she faced her own fears. And she survived, I think. That's what is the important part. Sorry.
Okay, thank you so much. So I think, you have another question? Okay, yes, please.
So this is a question about the errors in teaching. So there are some kinds of what are called socio-mathematical norms that are supported by teachers in classrooms, like offering extended explanations instead of quick answers, that may be easier to support than the utility of errors in a discussion for students to not worry about if they err. And I just wonder, what are the challenges in supporting these kinds of norms for students who may, among their peers, devalue errors, and at home may have parents who devalue errors? It strikes me that these are challenging kinds of practice to support in classrooms.
Yes.
Well, the main challenges are our culture, that even when reform says that we need to give a different value to errors, we're still thinking, we stay acting as errors are not something valuable. Errors are allowed everywhere except in a school. So as you said, maybe if I go to my house as a student with a bad grade because my errors, my parents are gonna be not accepting that kind of errors as well. So students, teachers, parents, all we need to change our beliefs, our dispositions toward errors to establish a really cultures of a really friendly, error-friendly culture in our classrooms, in our lives. And we were observing that, for example, a teacher that has established this kind of culture, he connects every error with real life. He say, well, this is the way that real life is gonna be working or is working outside. Everybody makes mistakes, and we need to learn from our mistakes. We need to have ownership in our mistakes to really face life. And maybe that is the big challenge, that we need to accept errors everywhere, not only at school, but at school mainly.
How convinced do you think the students are in the teachers' efforts to support the legitimacy of errors in classroom discussions and that kind of thing?
I see the difference between a teacher who has established this kind of culture with that kind of teachers that have this low disposition, their positioning toward errors are non-productive. I see how the students of this first teacher who has a very productive disposition, who has this positioning toward errors as a tool of learning, how they act very naturally toward their mistakes. They use mistakes to learn. They are accustomed to discuss their mistakes. They even celebrate their mistakes because they have a good outcome from them. And these students who are with these teachers who doesn't accept mistakes, they reject their mistakes. They are ashamed about their mistakes. So I see how teachers influence their students' dispositions toward mistakes. They are crucial for their students, not only dispositions in that specific class, but in their future, in the way that they see their mistakes as something that can make them understand not only mathematics, but real life.
Okay, thank you very much. So
Thank you.
I think we are perfectly on time, so let's thank our speakers again.